It's not difficult to manipulate choice if you control what those choices are going to be. And in this case, it was Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. If we call Clinton, I think appropriately, the catastrophe, then America has dodged a bullet in that sense today, and literally so, because one thing's for sure, that if Clinton had have won the presidency, then America and the Western world was almost certainly going to war with Russia. That might still happen, but it was a certainty if she'd have come to power. And this is what the demonization of Russia and the build-up of forces along the Russian border, NATO forces, has been all about. Instead, a majority of those that voted have chosen Donald Trump. And the question is why? And there are some positive expressions of that, even though I think that Trump will be a disaster, and I think that those that have put their faith in Trump are going to be deeply disappointed with what happens during his time in the White House. However, there are some positive things about this, which reflect something that's happening, and I'm seeing it on this world tour all over the world. And we saw it with Brexit in the United Kingdom. And that is a change, a very obvious change in increasing swathes of the collective human psyche, which is looking at the world anew and rejecting the political establishment. Now, I don't think for a second that Donald Trump is an outsider. But that is irrelevant to the fact that he was perceived by vast numbers of people to be an outsider, to be someone who was challenging the establishment, who was, in the phrase that was so often used, who was draining the swamp. So to look at why this result happened, we need to look at perceptions. Because from perceptions come actions, like how you vote. So we had the perception, and it was an absolutely correct one, quite obviously and demonstrably, that Hillary Clinton was establishment to her DNA, has a whole political career based on corruption, manipulation, and merciless destruction of opponents. I mean, Bernie Sanders, I rest my case. And therefore, she was always going to be a really, really difficult sell. And if she had have been against almost anyone except Donald Trump, in terms of a candidate that people saw as in any way positive, then she would have lost by an even greater margin. So on one side, you've got the perception of Clinton as an establishment clone to her core, and therefore it was always a difficult sell, even in normal times. But these are not normal times, these are changing times. She proved to be an impossible sell when this shift in the psyche is happening, where people are rejecting the political class and the political establishment that has dictated the direction of the world and the fine detail of people's lives for so long. So it's not so much what Donald Trump is that brought this about, it is what so many people perceived him to be, which is an outsider of the system. And so the outcome of this election mirrors, in terms of, I think, the motivations behind it, what happened with Brexit in the United Kingdom, where, again, there was a massive rejection of the political class and the political establishment, virtually the entirety of which was urging people with threats of dire consequences to stay in the EU. So we are in changing times. And while I don't think for a minute that Donald Trump is going to deliver what so many people thought he was going to deliver, put that aside and look at the reasons for why he attracted so much support. Yes, a significant amount would have been support for Donald Trump because he wasn't Hillary Clinton, and they were only given a choice of the two. And again, a significant part of Clinton's vote, which says an even bigger statement about her, given the vote she got, was because she wasn't Donald Trump. It was an extraordinary, almost culmination of this political stitch-up that the motivation of so many was to vote against the person they liked the least. However, it's also an expression of this gathering and ever-gathering rejection of the political establishment, which Trump was perceived to be a vehicle for expressing. Where does it go from here? Well, it depends where Donald Trump goes from here and how much he himself becomes in office just another clone of the political establishment. And I think people are going to be disappointed. And I hope that should that happen, that people will go on to the next stage of this awakening. And that's to realize that the political system itself, no matter how you perceive the person you put in office to be, is the problem. The way society is structured, the way it is dictated to by the hidden hand, the hidden networks that ultimately control these people, whether they're Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or wherever else. And that we have to go to the next stage of the awakening to the world and realize that it's not the political system that's going to change anything. It's the vast majority ceasing to cooperate with the actions of the few and the dictates of the few, whether they are one party or the other party, whether they are Clinton or Trump or Bush or Obama or whoever. Because the few, what's called the political class, political establishment, financial class, financial establishment, can only dictate to the vast majority because the vast majority cooperate with the diktats and the laws imposed by the few. When we stop cooperating with laws that are unjust, with laws that are simply designed to take our freedoms away, that are designed to control our lives and what we can do and what we can't do in terms of free choice and free thought, when we stop cooperating with them and say we're not doing it, no, we're not abiding by that. We're not abiding by that. We're not going to let you build a prison and we put the bricks together, thank you very much. We're not doing it. If someone comes out of the White House, Clinton or Trump or anybody else, or out of Downing Street, and said we've had a meeting and we've decided that this is what's going to happen, it only happens if people, the vast majority, say, well, we better do it, it's the law. Well, that means whoever, the tiny few, that dictate the laws, no matter what they may be, impose their will on the vast majority. This is the next stage of awakening to how the world works. Not seeing some person as an outsider who's going to come and change everything. I think we're going to see in coming months that is not the case in terms of what people think will happen. but to realize that the only way to stop the few imposing their will on the many is for the many to stop cooperating with the few, and the dictates and the laws, the rules and regulations of the few, where they are specifically designed to destroy free thought, free expression, and freedom of choice. So while, you know, I think, like I say, people are going to be disappointed with what follows on, this is another significant expression that people have had enough. It's like a primal scream, a cry for help, a scream of frustration that was expressed through this vote for Trump. A scream of frustration at having no one listen to you, having no one think about your interests when they're stitching up the world. And that's a good thing. But there are many stages, I would suggest, of this to go yet. And one of them is that we don't think that any person through the political system is going to change the world for the better, because we have to do that. And we have to do that together.
A long time ago, I read a book that he wrote, which, this was back in 1999, which described the world that we live in today almost to a T. It talked about how there would be terrorist attacks, that terrorist attacks would be used to control people and get them, you know, to give up their civil liberties. It talked about escalating wars that have happened. It talked about a rise in UFO sightings and UFOs being covered in the mainstream media. But it also talked about the world being controlled by shape-shifting reptiles that live in the center of a hollowed-out Earth and exist in the fourth dimension. Point for point for point, almost everything in that book has been proved to be, in a way, true, aside from that final thing, shape-shifting reptiles that control the Earth. So I want to talk to this guy now. His name is David Icke, specifically about that idea and that theory, and go through what various people have to say about it. David Icke, thanks for joining us on the show.
No problem, Nick.
So, I mean, I just mentioned in the intro there, I've read your work. I've not read every book you've written, but I've certainly read quite a few. And what I want to talk to you about is specifically the idea, possibly the idea for which you're the most famous, which is that there are shape-shifting reptilians who are extraterrestrial reptilians that control this planet. Now, is that something that you believe, yes or no?
Oh, God, yes. You know, I didn't sit in a darkened room coming up with this theory, nor did I go looking for it. I have traveled immensely all over the world, been to 50 countries now researching this and talking about it. And when you come across the same information from people from all walks of life, all over the world, of the experiences they've had, and I heard some more this very weekend. And when you then see in ancient accounts the same phenomena being described, and when you talk then to insiders who privately talk to you because they don't agree with what's going on, but are stuck inside organizations like the CIA and other groups and can't get out, and they tell you the same thing, then either you say it's beyond my religious belief system or scientific belief system, so I'm not going there, or my goodness me, what are people going to say if I talk about this, and therefore don't go there. Or you can be like me, who doesn't give a damn what people think of him. I'm interested in what's going on, and I don't edit information by fear of what people will say about it, nor fear of consequences in any way, shape or form. And this started coming into my life in, I guess, towards the second half of the 90s, particularly in the latter half of the 90s, from about 97. And it took the form of meeting people who were telling me of their experiences, of seeing people, often in positions of power, but not always, change from a human form to a reptilian form and then back again in front of their eyes. And the number of stories that I've been told and the incredible common themes have just grown and grown and grown until they're a mountain, a tidal wave, however you want to symbolize it. But
well, most famously, it's the idea is that the royal family are shape-shifting reptiles or members of the royal family.
Well, yeah, and let me put some history on this. Wherever you look, Nick, all over the world, in among native peoples and ancient accounts, you find a common theme. And that is of an interbreeding between humans and a non-human race, which over and over takes a reptilian form to create hybrid bloodlines, a fusion of the DNA.
Now, hang on, if I can just interrupt you there. I heard you talk about that, and I went down to London where there's a museum, and they have Sumerian texts which talk about the gods having sex with people. And is that what you're talking about? The gods would then be the reptiles, the reptilians, literally having sex with human beings?
Well, I mean, quite possibly literally having sex, but a lot of this stuff is done by real high-tech means. I mean, you know, we're talking about entities that are vastly in advance of where the human race is currently in the mainstream. They're not necessarily in the underground bases and the secret projects so much, ahead of where we are in terms of understanding genetics and technology and the body and reality in general, which gives them a massive advantage over a human population that's basically ignorant of all those things. But these hybrid bloodlines became what are known in the ancient texts as the demigods, the part human, part gods, because these advanced, at least technologically advanced, these advanced entities technologically were obviously perceived as gods. I mean, when some members or groups of the U.S. military in the last century, the earlier part of the last century, went into some parts of the world which had not seen people like that and not seen the technology they had, they were perceived as gods as well. And so you can see how that would come about. And these hybrid bloodlines were the ones that became the royal families of the ancient world. For instance, the Chinese emperors used to claim the right to be emperor because of their descendants, their genetic descendants from the serpent gods. See, in China and the Far East, all those cultures are founded on the symbol and the myths of the dragon. Well, that comes from this reptilian connection. So these royal families all over the world were given the right to rule and justified their right to rule because they had the genetics of the gods, this hybrid genetics. And this is where the whole idea comes from of the divine right to rule and the divine right of kings and all that stuff. It's not, you know, a God as people perceive God in whatever way they do. It's the divine right to rule because of your bloodline. Let's just let's bring the royal family in here, Nick. Across the water from me, here on the Isle of Wight in London, we have a head of state in the UK today who is only head of state because of her genetics and her bloodline. You know, if she had a different genetics and a different family history, she might be, you know, cleaning Buckingham Palace, not living in it. But the whole point is that these royal bloodlines ruled the ancient world, and they became the bloodlines that ruled the Roman Empire. They moved up into Northern Europe. They became the aristocracy and royal families of Europe. This is where the whole interbreeding and the obsession with interbreeding comes from among royals and aristocracy all over the world, and now in the big financial, banking and political families which have followed on. It's because they're holding a particular genetic structure together, which is very quickly diluted if you interbreed with outside of itself. And so you've got the obsession through history of royal families and aristocratic families interbreeding with each other. There came a point where these families who were overtly controlling through being kings, queens, etc., had a problem when the people started to demand some more say in their own affairs and how they were governed. So there was a movement of these bloodlines out of the over-royal dictatorship situation into the political arena that followed, into the banking, the corporations, the business, the media ownership, and all the rest of it. And now these families, which are now wearing dark suits, most of them, rather than crowns and coronets, they sit atop these pyramids that control the global media, the global banking system, the global transnational corporations, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And they work as one unit. And what they've created is a equivalent of a transnational corporation, which is, in their terms, it's a secret society network, where you have the headquarters in Europe, massively in London, but other centers like France and Germany as well. And they have in each country a secret society subsidiary company, if you like, where the bloodline families in those particular countries orchestrate their sphere of influence, whether it's the United States, South Africa, Australia, wherever, in line with the centrally dictated agenda. So when I've traveled around the world, I've seen the same things happening in country after country, the same legislation justified by the same excuses, and this is how it's done, because this family of reptilian human hybrids have created this global spider's web secret society structure in which they move as one unit. And so you have had the incessant centralization of power, decade after decade after decade after decade, because when there's a few of you compared with a global population, you have to centralize decision-making if you're going to have power over the many. And we've even got a name for it now called globalization. And these families, these hybrid families, are behind that incessant push for centralization of global power.
Okay, so if I could just recap then. It's Kerrang, it's the night before, we're talking to David Icke at the moment, and we're talking to him specifically about the idea that the world is controlled by reptilian beings from, literally, am I right in saying, David, from another planet? These things...
Well, no, well, you know, what is another planet? I mean, I'm saying from outside of the human frequency range of visible sight, what is known as by scientists as visible light, which is a tiny frequency range that the human body can decode. You know, people think that we live in a kind of a world. We don't. We live in a frequency range which the human body computer, which is what it is, can decode. And outside of that is what scientists call dark matter or dark energy, and that's not dark in the sense that it's, you know, like the light's off, you can't see. They call it dark because luminous matter, luminous energy, is the only form that the body can decode. So anything outside of that we can't decode, and they call it dark matter, dark energy.
Okay.
And that's where these reptilian entities operate in, a frequency range just outside of visible light. So in the normal course of everyday experience, you can't see them. But when they enter visible light, which they do occasionally, then you see them, and because they're entering the frequency range that we can read and decode.
Okay, so I want to recap here so that people can follow what we're talking about. These creatures, the reptilian entities, if you look in the ancient texts, if you get, you know, even in the Bible, there are hints of this presence, and a non-human presence on this planet, and then as history progresses, they kind of vanish and they stop being mentioned. And this ties in with things like you can't lay your eyes on the emperor and so on and so forth.
Well, just on that one point, Nick, which you raise about you know, ancient texts and then the Bible and stuff. You know, I said on a Christian radio station that interviewed me a little while ago, who was talking about this. You know, do you really think that the snake in the Garden of Eden was really a snake? I mean, do you really believe that? And also, when you look at the ancient accounts around the world, and of course the Bible is just one version, you find the same recurring theme of the Garden of Eden type situation involving reptilian entities. And by the way, the Hebrew name for the snake in the Garden of Eden, if you like, is actually means a two-legged, standing upright humanoid reptilian.
And in the story of the Bible, the snake loses its legs as well. But one of the things that I want to ask you about, the reason I'm pinning you down on this,
right,
is because I'm a fan of your work and I've read a lot of your books and been to your talks. But one of the things that irritates me is people will talk to me about your theories and they'll say, oh yeah, when he says that, he means the devil. Or, oh yeah, when he says that, he means like a specific race of people, like Jewish people, which doesn't quite add up because the Queen isn't Jewish. But do you know what I mean? So people will always try and make out that you're talking in metaphor.
No, it's not a metaphor, Nick. No, I'm literally talking about reptilian entities that operate just outside of visible light.
It's Kerrang! It's the night before. Currently talking to David Icke. David, if you want to carry on.
You know, since 2003, the thrust of my life and the synchronicity of my life has taken me, and increasingly right up to the present moment, deeper and deeper into the nature of reality and what it is. And when you start to understand this reality that we're experiencing, then the apparently impossible and apparently bizarre starts to take shape, and you can see how it's possible and how it's perfectly logical. If this world is literally solid, and these bodies, the human bodies, are literally solid, then shape-shifting is impossible. And I'm the first one to say that. You can't shift from a solid body to a solid body and back again. It's not on. But our bodies are not solid, and neither is the world, the reality that we experience, as quantum physicists are now long established. This world is supposed to be made up of atoms, this solid world, but when you look inside an atom, there's nothing in it. At one level, it's just a pocket of energy, and if you go deep enough into it, it just becomes what appears to us to be empty space. How can atoms that have no solidity make up a solid world? They can't. The structure of everything is energy, not solid mass, energy. And we are decoding energy fields into apparently solid forms in the same way as my computer next to me here takes electrical pulses and mathematical codes and turns them into pictures and graphics and colors and on the screen from the internet. You know, we live in what I describe as the cosmic internet. The internet is a terrific mirror of the reality that we experience. You know, the only place the internet exists in the form that we perceive it, websites, colors, graphics, movies, videos, is actually on the screen. It doesn't exist like that anywhere else. Everywhere else it's, like I say, electronic pulses and mathematical codes. Same with television. The only place that television exists as we perceive it in moving pictures and what have you is on the screen. Everywhere else it's codes and it's frequency fields depending on the form that you're involved with. And so what the body computer is doing is taking vibrational information. It's changing it through the five senses. It's transforming it into electrical information. Same information, just a different form. And what the five senses do is they take the vibrational information, they turn it into electrical information, and they transmit it to the brain. The brain then takes that and decodes it into an apparently solid world, and it turns that into the world we think we're experiencing. The brain, if you like, is like the computer screen or the television screen, the only place where the world that we perceive to be outside of us actually exists. And so things look solid because the brain decodes them that way because of the information contained within them, in the same way that a computer or a virtual reality game will make something look solid when it's nothing of the kind. So when we come to this shape-shifting, the shape-shifting, the movement from one form to another, one apparently solid form to another, is not taking place in that way, solid to solid and back to solid. The only place the shape-shifting takes place is in the decoding system in the brain. What's moving, what's shifting, is energetic information, not solid bodies. And so when you have these bloodlines, they are energy. That's what they are in their prime form. They're vibrational energy. So is DNA. So it's just information. So when they have this interbreeding, we see it in the decoded world as genetic procreation and genetic mixing, but what it is energetic mixing. And so it creates a vibrational field, that hybrid connection, that vibrates to a certain frequency, and that frequency is in sympathy, far more sympathy, with these reptilian entities that operate just outside visible light than the general run of the population is. So these particular hybrid bloodlines were created for that very reason, because what they are in fact are merely genetic shells which allow these entities outside of visible light, though not far outside, to possess, quote, these bodies, this age-old theme you find all over the world, possess these bodies and take over their mental and emotional processes. Not that there's much emotion involved in these guys. And so this is what is happening. And I don't care if people believe it. I mean, it's of no interest to me. I'm interested in what's going on, you know, not winning a popularity contest. But the secret society network manipulates these bloodlines into power, and in doing so, what it's actually doing is putting these entities just outside of visible light into power. And this is why people who can tease out a wider visual frequency range than most people, what people call psychics and stuff, visual psychics, that's why they see these entities overshadowing these people in power, like the Bush family and the royal family and all this stuff.
Now, if you're right, one of the obvious questions is, if there are entities that can shapeshift, that live on this planet, why are they letting you talk about this?
Well, because first of all, there are forces at work that are not trying to manipulate anybody, but are trying to make people aware of the manipulation. And let's not get caught in the idea that these entities are all powerful. If they were all powerful, they'd have taken over a long time ago. What they are doing is manipulating this reality from just outside of this reality, and they're using these hybrid bloodlines to do it, these Illuminati interbreeding families, as I call them. And they're doing it by getting humans to imprison themselves. The vast majority of people who enforce the laws that are passed through the power structure that these guys have covertly created in politics, business, banking, and all the rest of it, the people in uniform and the dark suit administrators in government, they have not a clue what's going on. The only way they could control and manipulate billions of people, when in comparing numbers, you're talking a relative handful of people who are manipulating in full knowledge, is to get the 7 billion to police each other. So what they've done is created fault lines called race, religion, income bracket, cultures, and all the rest of it, to play off against each other, to put humanity at war with each other, to create the whole idea that we have to compete with each other and winner takes all, and if you don't trample all over people, then they'll trample all over you, dog eat dog, and all this stuff. And they've set humanity at war with themselves, and they give people incentives and rewards when they do what the system wants, and they punish people when they don't. So for instance, just take a journalist. If you write your stories and you report the world in a way that sells the version of the world to the public that these guys want, then you prosper and do very well in journalism, earn a lot of money, probably get a lot of prestige and all the rest of it. You start writing stuff that is not reporting and describing the world in those terms, and you forget any career in journalism worth a name, and you're going to have to do what I do and do it alone, because you're never going to work in the mainstream media. It's the same with all these institutions. If you don't play the game as a government administrator, then you don't stay a government administrator very long. If you don't play the game when you're a prime minister or a president, first of all, you don't even become prime minister or president, because you don't get the financial, media, and other support to allow it to happen. And so any genuine politician that wants to stand up and say, hey, the world's not like they're telling you it is, he's never ever gonna get far up the greasy pole, if any distance at all. So this is how they do it. They're getting, if you like, they're getting the sheep to police the sheep.
Tons of earth, and are the most challenging offensive targets, because they are the ultimate defensive hideouts, protecting civilians, soldiers, and our deadliest weapons. Now, bunkers on Modern Marvels. From indomitable fortified structures to secret hideaways buried deep beneath the ground, bunkers offer protection from one's enemies and the hope of a refuge in the face of unthinkable danger. One of the largest, most secret bunkers ever built lies nestled in a lush and remote pocket of the Allegheny Mountains, near White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. The luxurious Greenbrier Hotel and Recreational Facility is a 5-hour drive from the nation's capital. This 6,500-acre resort is a playground for the rich and famous. The 531-room main hotel is complemented by 3 golf courses and innumerable amenities. But this old Southern-style mansion belies a deep secret. Behind this utility door, marked high voltage to keep out the curious, lies the entrance to one of the largest, most secret bunkers of the Cold War.
I'm standing at the wheel of a 25-ton blast door. This is one of 4 entrances into the bunker itself. We're standing at the west tunnel entrance. This particular door, as well as the other 3 doors, all have to be manually operated. It is 10 by 18, 18 inches thick, and it swings freely in closing it to lock it into place.
This bunker was designed to protect not an individual or small group, but every member of the United States Congress in the event of a nuclear strike. Codenamed Greek Island, the facility was encased by up to 3 feet of steel-reinforced concrete, with portions resting nearly 100 feet beneath the ground.
This bunker really was an amazing project in the sense that it was not just a big concrete box. It was a site where a whole segment of the government come down. They could live here, they could sleep here, they could eat here. All their physical needs were taken care of.
18 Spartan dormitories with a capacity of 60 individuals each comprised the core of the bunker. A dining facility able to feed 400 at a time, and chambers large enough to accommodate sessions by both the House of Representatives and Senate completed the complex. Enough food and water were stored to sustain the lawmakers for 60 days. Meanwhile, 42,000 gallons of diesel fuel was available to feed 3 generators, providing power for over a month. For government planners, this seemed a long enough period to ensure delivery of more supplies. Built in 1958, the construction of the Greenbrier bunker was shrouded in secrecy.
So the challenge was, the government is asking the Greenbrier and its owners, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway, to build a huge 112,000 square foot steel reinforced concrete bunker right next to a major luxury resort hotel without anybody noticing what they're doing. So, how are we going to do this is the issue. And they come up with a very clever idea, which is we're going to build it right in front of everybody's nose.
The plan called for the Greenbrier Hotel to build a new wing. Work on the new building would mask construction of the mammoth subterranean bunker. Tons of excavated earth from beneath the hotel were quietly disposed of by building an additional 9-hole golf course. But the simultaneous construction of the hotel and bunker led to some interesting compromises.
An unusual aspect to this secret bunker is that a portion of it, about 1/5 of the square footage, was in fact available to Greenbrier guests. In fact, situations would arise where you'd be standing there and somebody would sort of say, hey, I understand there's a secret bunker at the Greenbrier. And you say, no, there's no such thing. And there you were, standing inside of this secret bunker.
The room behind me was used by many thousands of Greenbrier guests. They never realized it was part of the bunker. Hidden behind this secret panel is an 18-ton blast door. When closed, it seals off the bunker from the hotel.
Despite the government's best efforts, covert construction and hidden doors could not keep the bunker secret. A Washington Post article in 1992 blew its cover, effectively destroying the facility as thoroughly as a nuclear bomb. Given the accuracy and power of today's weapons, a bunker is only as good as its anonymity. The newly exposed Greenbrier was retired, but most certainly not before another top-secret congressional bunker was opened to take its place. With secrecy at a premium, it goes without saying that the best bunkers in the world are the ones we know nothing about. The President of the United States is said to have access to a network of top-secret bunkers, probably located on or near military bases around the country. In addition, the President relies on a sort of flying bunker, Air Force One. Able to refuel in mid-air, the plane can stay aloft indefinitely or be flown to any number of secret hideouts. Bunkers, of course, can protect us from the enemy, but they can also protect the enemy from us. That's why building bunkers is only half of any country's defensive challenge. Learning how to smash through bunkers is equally important. Beneath this desert landscape sits a state-of-the-art fortified defensive position, a military bunker. Safely hidden from sight, the bunker is built of concrete and reinforced steel and protected by tons of earth. But it is about to be utterly destroyed. The GBU-28 Bunker Buster bomb has been specially designed to destroy hardened underground targets.
The GBU-28 is this weapon right here. In the front, it's got a laser detector where we can spot a laser on the ground, and this weapon will fly directly to that spot very accurately.
The heart of this bomb is a 5,000-pound warhead. But it is the brains of the weapon that make it especially effective against bunkers.
A fuse is a little device used to set off this warhead, and what it'll enable this weapon to do is actually count the floors it's going through in an underground bunker. So it can actually sense different stories, and we can have it go off in the precise room where a critical computer, radio transmitter, maybe even weapons of mass destruction are located.
Weapons such as the GBU-28 underscore a fact that bunker builders have struggled with since the dawn of the nuclear age. The destructive power unleashed by today's weapons is far greater than any structure can withstand. But that has not stopped people from trying to build the perfect bunker. One of the most impressive bunkers in the world lies beneath 9,565-foot Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Entombed nearly 1/3 of a mile under this massive granite peak sits the Cheyenne Mountain Operations Center.
The reason that the United States established Cheyenne Mountain as a bunker was to create a central facility within which it could collect information initially about bomber attacks against the United States, hence its name, the North American Air Defense Command, NORAD. and later to warn the United States of an attack with ballistic missiles that presumably would have been launched from the Soviet Union.
Built in 1966, Cheyenne Mountain was one of the deepest and best protected military bunkers on the planet. The facility was specially designed to withstand a near hit by a nuclear device. Shielded by the mountain, the 15-building complex was shock isolated on hundreds of 3-foot steel springs. In the event of an attack, these springs would provide a moving barrier between the facility and shifting earth. 25-ton blast doors seal the 4.5-acre facility, protecting the military and civilian staff from the force and heat of a nuclear blast. Nearly 1,200 people can survive in this mountain for up to 3 weeks. At a cost of $142.4 million, the massive bunker jointly run by the United States and Canada is still active, protecting the personnel and equipment that scan the skies for enemy attacks. But few experts believe even this bunker could withstand a barrage from today's nuclear arsenal.
In the early days, nuclear weapons were not terribly accurate. A place like Cheyenne Mountain, for example, with the NORAD headquarters, was reasonably safe because it was unlikely they could be directly hit. But today, with super accurate missiles, there's virtually no place that's invulnerable.
Not even a bunker in the middle of a mountain. Next, cannons and forts face off, while high explosives bring armies to new lows during World War I. The first GBU-28 bunker buster bombs were made from used cannon barrels. Bunkers will return on Modern Marvels. Bunkers are relatively recent creations on the military fortification family tree. But the story of defensive structures goes back to ancient times and the beginnings of war.
Fortifications have existed as long as people have built buildings. From the very earliest ages, there was a need to defend against some sort of hostile threat. And as technology advanced, the need to improve those defenses to meet that technology also increased.
For thousands of years, fortified positions had the upper hand during battle. Ancient siege machines were so ineffective against citadels and walled cities that attacking armies often resorted to treachery. During the legendary Trojan War, the Greeks spent 9 years trying to breach the walls of Troy. They finally succeeded after convincing the Trojans to accept a giant gift horse made of wood. Greek soldiers hidden inside the horse waited until they were safely through the city gates to mount their attack. The clandestine Greeks bear testament to the near invulnerability of early strongholds. From primitive forts of earth and rock to medieval castles of carved stone, these fortifications enabled a relatively small number of defenders to hold off armies many times their size. The first real challenge to defensive superiority came with the invention of the cannon, a powerful yet relatively mobile siege weapon. First used in the 14th century, projectiles fired from cannons forced builders to construct thicker walls to safeguard the structures within.
When artillery first came along, the first attempt that the military engineers tried to do was to make their walls thicker and stronger. But that didn't work. As artillery got better, it was able to knock down the stone walls no matter how thick they made them.
Military engineers responded by sinking fortress walls into the ground, using the earth to absorb a shell's impact. The new defensive technique, coupled with the relative inaccuracy of early artillery, shifted the advantage back to the defender, where it remained well into the 19th century.
We've reached a stage where the technology of war makes fixed, known facilities highly vulnerable. Once you have accurate artillery, you have the ability to destroy a facility. It might take you days or weeks, but very few things can withstand long-term assault with artillery.
The American Civil War saw the first widespread use of these more accurate weapons. In 1862, just 2 years after the start of hostilities, The Confederate-held Fort Pulaski on Cockspur Island in Savannah, Georgia, bore the brunt of an attack using newly developed rifle-barreled cannons. Union shells fired from these weapons were stunningly accurate. Fort Pulaski's 7.5-foot thick walls were pummeled by artillery fired more than a mile away. The dominance of ramped earth and stone walls was quickly coming to an end. The introduction of high explosives at the end of the 19th century made forts even more obsolete.
High explosives were capable of doing great amount of damage, more than any masonry or earth wall could sustain. So then there was a need to develop a new technology to deal with that. And the technology that they came up with was reinforced concrete.
At the turn of the 20th century, both France and Germany began to use the new technology to strengthen existing forts. Neither country realized that just 15 years later, the hardened structures would be at the center of the greatest battles of the First World War. Germans built the first true military bunkers and incorporated them into their trench lines during World War I. These relatively small structures made of steel and reinforced concrete defended German troops, command centers, and weapons against the nearly 5 million tons of explosives fired by the Allies. Here in the French countryside lay the remnants of a World War I concrete bunker. Less than 120 kilometers north of Paris, this structure was once part of a 250-mile trench and bunker complex, comprising the famed Western Front. Today, the bunker's rusting steel reinforcing rods protrude from the crumbling concrete shell, as it marks the boundary between a bean patch and a field of wheat. During the war, machine gunners inside these bunkers were blinded by smoke and deafened by the sound of their weapons reverberating off the bare walls. But being inside the bunker was far preferable to being outside. Firing through slits, known as embrasures, bunker gunners took a terrible toll in Allied lives. So hated were the machine gunners that upon surrendering, they were often executed by vengeful soldiers. Still, the bunkers were remarkably successful.
One of the reasons that the bunker concept really took hold was the realization that the old-fashioned fort was really a case of putting all of your eggs in one basket. A fort was considered to be a target, and damage to one portion could potentially damage another portion. So you wanted to disperse your defense as much as possible, and that led to putting everything in isolated bunkers.
France and Germany each suffered nearly 1.5 million casualties in the Great War. The catastrophic losses prompted both countries to create bunker and defensive line fortifications on an unprecedented scale. The French began construction on the Maginot Line in 1929, a 200-mile defensive barrier that they believed would keep Germany at bay. Stretching over much of the northern and eastern borders of France and incorporating many natural barriers, the mammoth structure may be the greatest bunker complex ever built.
The Maginot Line used the theory of a thin, tough skin. A very narrow but very strong line of fortifications that was designed to repulse the enemy.
The fortification consisted of a line of strong, mutually supporting, completely self-sufficient bunkers. Armed with machine guns and anti-tank weapons, much of the line bristled with artillery. Some of the structures were connected via tunnel to a subterranean support complex containing a command post, living quarters, storage facilities, and power plant. In short, everything necessary to make them fully independent. The largest structures within the line utilized integrated rail systems to move men and ammunition. Taken as a whole, the Maginot Line was a formidable obstacle to any hostile advance. But it would not fulfill the French desire to keep the Germans out. In 1940, soon after the outbreak of World War II, Hitler's forces completely circumvented the Maginot Line by first invading Luxembourg and Belgium to the north, and then descending into France.
Between the wars, The Germans in particular developed a new approach to warfare. They'd seen what happened in trench warfare, and they didn't want to repeat it. And they looked at ways to avoid repeating that. The French, on the other hand, were basically still ready to fight the First World War. They weren't prepared for what the Germans did, and when the Germans went round the Maginot Line, they had no counter.
After overrunning most of France, the Germans circled back to finally take on the Maginot Line. But even when attacked from behind, the French fortifications were exceptionally difficult to destroy. The Germans unleashed heavy artillery fired from a distance. But bringing forward special guns and zeroing in on the target took precious time. For the lightning-fast German war machine, the best offense against bunkers was infantry soldiers. The many different types of bunkers in the Maginot Line meant that no one textbook maneuver worked. Most plans involved first blinding the bunkers with flamethrowers, then moving in close to plant an explosive device known as a satchel charge. Though the bunkers were clearly vulnerable, they had proven their effectiveness. So much so that while the Germans fought to crush the remaining Maginot bunkers, they also built similar concrete structures on the western seaboard of France to protect their newly conquered territory. But like the bunkers of the Maginot Line, the German fortifications would prolong the battle, but ultimately lose the war. Next, the weapons of the Second World War force engineers to construct some of the greatest bunkers ever built. German machine gun bunkers during World War I were referred to as pillboxes by English troops because they resembled a pharmacist's pill container. Bunkers will return on Modern Marvels. German submarines were the bane of Allied ships during the Second World War. Patrolling the waters of the North Atlantic, the submarines stopped American supplies and troops from reaching European ports. When submerged, these stealthy hunters were almost unstoppable. But above water, they were nearly helpless, particularly vulnerable when taking on supplies or being repaired. Building a bunker to protect a single 250-foot submarine would be a major undertaking. But on the northeastern shores of occupied France, Germany built a submarine bunker complex to house not one, but up to 24 of their U-boats. 3 mammoth block structures comprised the submarine complex in the seaside village of Lorient. Inside these bunkers lay a small city, able to house and protect the submarines, as well as perform repairs and store tons of ammunition, torpedoes, and fuel to supply the underwater killers.
To build this phenomenal structure, they obviously needed a lot of workers. Nearly 15,000 prisoners labored for 2 years to build the base.
Most of the labor went into constructing the roofs of the buildings. The bunker's ceilings were built of steel-reinforced concrete over 10 feet thick to protect against enemy bombs. The third and largest building has 2 roofs, making it nearly impenetrable.
Le premier toit qui fait 3,50 m d'épaisseur et couvre. The first ceiling measures 3.5 meters thick and covers the entire building. Then there is an airspace on top of which there is a second roof which covers approximately 2/3 of the bunker.
The roofs were so well built, they forced the British to develop special 6-ton bunker buster bombs called tall boys. On August 6, 1944, the Royal Air Force scored a direct hit. This 15-foot wide crater on top of the roof is the result of the monstrous blast. But despite the tremendous explosion, the weapon was only able to penetrate a few feet. The roof was so thick, nearly 20 feet of solid reinforced concrete remained intact to protect the facility below. The tall boy at least managed to land on the roof. Most other bombs earmarked for the bunker and the planes carrying them never came close. Over the course of the war, nearly 20,000 German soldiers were assigned to anti-aircraft batteries atop the bunker complex and throughout the surrounding city. Successful attacks by Allied pilots were nearly impossible. Aerial frontal attacks on the bunker were equally difficult. Many of the submarine pens have water-level blast doors that were lowered at the first sign of trouble. The barrier would stop torpedoes and specially designed skipping bombs from literally entering through the front door. For additional protection, the Germans scuttled 2 ships in the harbor. 200 yards from the bunker's entrance, the sunken ships provided an additional barrier to defend against torpedo attacks. The bunkers were impervious to nearly every weapon in the Allied arsenal. Still, they were vulnerable. The Lorient bunkers depended upon a steady stream of goods and materials to operate properly. Once the Allies realized they could not destroy the bunkers outright, they turned to cutting the supply lines. Unfortunately for the French, the bunker supply lines ran directly through the city of Lorient.
60,000 bombs fell on the city and only 70 buildings were left standing in the town center after the war. The whole city had to be rebuilt. Fortunately, the Lorient population was completely evacuated before the bombing started. So on a human level, there were few victims, but on a material level, we lost everything.
Lorient suffered the same devastating fate as many European cities during the war. But unlike Lorient, other cities were rarely able to evacuate beforehand. In London, German bombers showered the city with high explosives and incendiary bombs. The citizens sought refuge underground. Bunkers and hastily converted subway tunnel shelters protected the people while the city above them burned.
The bombs that were raining down on London at that time, and indeed not just London, but practically every major city in the UK, were doing incredible damage. A stick of bombs could devastate a whole area, literally flatten buildings, destroy streets, destroy people's way of life. And you might go down to an underground shelter, maybe a tube shelter, or even just a street shelter, and come out and find your whole street had literally just disappeared.
Disappearing was not an option for the British government, and in particular Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who refused to leave London, worried that his absence would demoralize the British people. But where could high-level British officials take refuge as the bombs fell? The British addressed that question by building a top-secret, high-tech command bunker in the center of London. Converted from a series of small basement storerooms in 1938, the Cabinet War Room served as the underground nerve center from which Churchill and his war cabinet led the fight.
The configuration of the Cabinet War Rooms in 1940 was about 21 rooms, making up about 1,000 square meters. But when it extended in 1941 to 45, it occupied somewhere in the region of about 100 rooms and was literally 3 times as big.
Located under the present-day Treasury building, the bunker is within walking distance of both Parliament and number 10 Downing Street. But it was chosen less for its size and location than for its strength.
The building had a steel frame in it. Steel frame building technology was relatively new or even revolutionary at that time. It wouldn't necessarily stop a bomb, but it would hopefully withstand better if a bomb ever hit it.
Unconcerned with aesthetics, British builders left these exposed steel girders visible in nearly every major room of the bunker, Oak joists shored up the smaller rooms and kept the ceiling from crashing down during bombing raids.
I think the planners knew when it became a headquarters building that it wasn't, properly speaking, bomb-proof. But it was only at the end of 1940, so well into the bombing raids of the Blitz, which started in September of that year, that they finally began to install proper bomb-proofing. And what they put in was a layer of reinforced concrete, and quite the strongest concrete you can imagine, varying in thickness between about 5 and 10 feet, depending what it was covering.
This cutaway in the ceiling reveals the thickness of the concrete as it rests upon the steel girder subframe. But it was not just the strength of this structure that made it such an effective command bunker. Behind this unassuming bathroom door lies one of the greatest technological secrets of the entire war.
The war rooms were really Churchill's high-tech basement headquarters, and one of the highest high-tech items in it, I suppose, was the so-called transatlantic telephone. And it allowed the Prime Minister to talk to the President in complete secrecy. And it was, in effect, really the first direct secret hotline. So it was behind this humble door marked with a very basic toilet lock that some of the most secret and high-level conversations of the war were taking place.
But not every secret associated with the cabinet war rooms was so diligently concealed.
Cabinet War Room's code name, rather ironically, was number 2 Storey's Gate, which was its address. So I think if the Germans ever did find out about it, they had a pretty fair idea where it might be. The Germans expected Churchill to be rather deeper and rather further away from his normal premises than literally 10 feet underground, 100 yards from his official residence.
On the other side of the war, Adolf Hitler too sought shelter in underground bunkers. These bunkers were the backdrops for some of the most dramatic events in the war. The Führer survived an assassination attempt after disillusioned German officers placed a bomb in his Wolfschanze bunker complex, which was located on the border between Poland and Germany. But the most infamous bunker in the world was constructed under the Chancellery building in the heart of Berlin.
The reason that bunker survived, and it survived until the very end of the war when both Soviet and later American and other troops went in to investigate that facility, it survived because we, as the Allies, did not have weapons that were sufficiently accurate to destroy that bunker. What we were doing is launching aircraft and conducting raids against that bunker, but bombs in World War II had accuracies measured in hundreds, if not thousands of meters. And to destroy a hardened, deep underground facility or bunker, you have to have weapons that land directly on that facility, otherwise it'll survive forever.
Though the structure survived the onslaught, Hitler did not, taking his own life inside the bunker on April 30th, 1945. With the defeat of Germany, America turned its full attention to the South Pacific and Japan. The death knell for the island nation arrived August 6, 1945. The atomic blast on Hiroshima killed nearly 100,000 people and forever changed the landscape of peace and war. Bunkers seemed pointless against the awesome power of a nuclear blast. Yet the terrible weapon would lead to a bunker building explosion, the likes of which the world had never seen. Next, frightened Americans dig in deep, while the Air Force builds bunkers to protect the deadliest of weapons. Winston Churchill's Cabinet War Room's bunker had many gadgets, including one of the first electric cigar lighters. Bunkers will return on Modern Marvels. With the onset of the Cold War and the sudden possibility of nuclear attack, paranoia gripped the American public.
You might be out playing at home when the warning...
Stop, drop, and cover became the survivalist mantra for an entire generation. The United States government did its best to allay the nation's fears.
When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about.
I think in retrospect, as we look back on that time, I think many conclude that the prospects for survival would have been very dim indeed, very dismal indeed. And, but this was reflective of a time in which people deeply feared that their existence was on the line, and bunkers were seen as the solution.
Despite the government's best efforts to provide protection, many Americans decided to take matters into their own hands. Backyard bomb shelters. The bunker for the man in the street became the rage. From basic store-bought models for less than $100 to specially built structures that cost as much as a house.
Hey, isn't this nice?
Well, Sir Ruth and I certainly can live in here very comfortably for at least 2 weeks. And you know, this room can be put to other uses as well.
Yes, Walt. You could use this as an extra bedroom for company.
As the United States came out of the Second World War, we had massive armies, we had developed nuclear weapons, we had crushed 2 enemies. Contrast that with the condition in the United States beginning in the 1950s when the Soviet Union in 1949 detonated a nuclear weapon. We now, for the first time in our history, faced absolute vulnerability. We never before had faced a time in which our survival, our existence, could be eradicated on the order of 30 minutes. And the reaction was to build bunkers throughout American society, both on the governmental level and the military level, as well as bunkers throughout American society, in many cases within residences.
Wall Street analysts in the 1950s projected the bomb shelter business as a potential $20 billion industry. But this was a quiet building boom. The construction and subsequent storage of food, water, and supplies in underground shelters was performed secretly, not from fear of the Russians, but from fear of one's own neighbors, fighting for cover during a missile attack. Ironically, the best Cold War bunkers did not protect people from nuclear weapons, but instead protected the nuclear weapons themselves. Buried deep in the desert flatlands outside of Tucson, Arizona, sits one of the most advanced and potentially deadly bunkers ever built. The facility and others like it were designed to protect and, if necessary, launch America's largest intercontinental ballistic missiles, the Titan IIs. Built as a retaliatory weapon, the missile could be launched in less than 10 minutes by a 2-man crew, operating deep within the facility. A Soviet missile sent to destroy the bunker would take just over half an hour to reach the site. By that time, the 103-foot Titan II would be thundering toward its Russian target. Constructed in the early 60s, the Titan II missile facility is comprised of a 146-foot deep silo and adjoining command center. The structure took nearly a year and a half to build and cost over $8 million. Like the Cheyenne Mountain bunker in Colorado, the Titan II facility was built to roll with the punches in the event of a nuclear strike.
Everything in here is shock isolated from the missile down to the smallest piece of equipment. That means they're mounted on springs. So should there be a ground movement for any reason, the equipment is not going to break. It's just going to move around.
The facility could also be closed off to the outside world during an attack.
We are entering the complex. We've just come through an area that's very well constructed but not hardened against attack. But once we go through a series of 3-ton blast doors like this one, we will be in the hardened part of the complex. There's a set of blast doors protecting the control center from the outside force and another set protecting it from the silo.
But the largest door is not inside the bunker at all. It's on top. The enormous 740-ton sliding silo door could be opened in 27 seconds. When closed, the door shielded the facility to help the structure survive a near hit by a nuclear weapon. By 1963, no less than 54 Titan II missile sites were operational throughout the country, ready at a moment's notice to obliterate an enemy target. Ironically, despite their construction and secrecy, nearly all the missile sites were knocked out, though not by an enemy attack. 53 of them were dismantled as part of a mutual disarmament pact between the two superpowers. Today, the Arizona bunker is the last that remains in its original form. It now draws visitors as a National Historic Site and stands as a testament to both bunker ingenuity and just how close we came to nuclear war. Next, smart bombs wreak havoc in Iraq, while the underground bunker meets its high-tech end. The Titan II missile currently in the silo near Tucson was disarmed, drilled with holes, and left above ground for 1 month to allow Soviet satellites to verify its decommission. Bunkers will return on Modern Marvels. The Iraq War. As Operation Iraqi Freedom began, the Iraqis entrenched their forces to defend against the onslaught of U.S.-led coalition troops. Just as in Desert Storm, bunkers and fortified structures housed everything, from artillery to Saddam Hussein himself. But the sense of security provided by these bunkers was quickly shattered. Smart bombs targeted and struck even the most secret of Saddam's hidden bunkers. Nothing could have prepared the Iraqi troops for the state-of-the-art precision-guided weapons. The war with Iraq suggested bunkers are no longer viable military options when fighting well-organized and technologically advanced militaries. And the U.S. Armament Center at Eglin Air Force Base wants to make that a reality. Occupying an area 2/3 the size of Rhode Island, the Air Armament Center on the Florida Panhandle builds and tests state-of-the-art bunker-busting weapons. Here, test pilots and scientists are able to perfect the guidance and delivery systems for these bombs by dropping them as if in a real battle situation.
When we're testing bunker buster type weapons, the idea is to put the weapon on the target. Ultimately, you plan a specific route to get to the target, and you release the weapon at a specified range from the target.
The weapons are so accurate, they can be dropped by planes up to 10 miles away and hit within feet of their target. Special fuses, guidance systems, and the ability to burrow underground make these bombs perfect bunker killers. But how do you test the individual components of a weapon that travels over 1,000 feet per second and is vaporized within milliseconds after impact?
We use our sled track tests.
3, 2, 1.
These sled tracks are like a railroad track going down for a long distance. We put rocket motors behind an actual bomb, and we have these things propelled down at the exact same speed that they would see when they hit the ground. At the end of the sled track, we build an actual bunker. We'll build it with the protection that we normally see in the ground. We have the hardened concrete, we have layers of dirt, and with that, what you can see is that we can test any of our warheads very effectively, just like it were flight tested.
High-speed cameras and electronic test equipment catch the apocalyptic destruction unleashed in a fraction of a second.
I do see a time when bunkers will no longer be a utility military protection, because we do have much more capable weapons in our inventory.
Despite their practical limitations, bunkers still continue to be built. Humans will always have an instinctual need to be protected and taken out of harm's way. The bunker mentality is as old as nearly any thought process. And as long